我们的
Okay, hello everyone. So thank you for joining our session today. We'll begin shortly, but yeah, welcome to the second discourse of our reimagining charcoal. So I'm Gwen. I'll be giving a short introduction on what the project is all about. Basically, this project is reimagining charcoal, and it's by Colllab. This is under the CTC grant, which is Connection Through Culture 2024 to 2025 project, and it's supported and funded by British Council. So this session actually is built upon our January roundtable, where we actually explored more on the charcoal industry itself, from its journey from the sustainability of mangrove plantations through to the productions, and also to its export, and along with any other challenges that is faced. And today we're moving a step forward, hopefully to start off to reimagine what is the potential of this charcoal, rather than beyond its traditional uses, and exploring its regenerative possibilities in material sciences, sustainability, and also industry innovation. So yeah, let's begin with a bit of introduction on the team. So from the Malaysian side, we have Doris and Casey as our project lead and co-lead. And from UK, we have Keita and Charlotte as our project and co-lead as well. Other than that, from our guest list today, we have two invited guests from Kuala Sepetang. So one is Bai Chi from Relook Portwell and Mr. Chua from My Charcoal Factory. And once again, allow us to thank everyone for joining. And we have so many experts from material innovation, engineering, sustainability research, community initiative, artists, and also academicians from Malaysia, Singapore, UK, Japan, and also Taiwan. So thank you everyone for joining our session today. And now I'll hand over to Casey to move on to the next session.
Okay, I'll take on from here. Let's make it a casual conversation session for today. For our guests, if you have any questions, you can then ask through opening your mic and interact with us time to time. We would welcome any question and discussion along the sharing. So welcome to the Discourse of Site Matters. Before we begin, I'd like to share about how this project come to us. So 2 years back, me and Doris from Colllab under the UCSI University as a lecturer, we have actually brought students to island, Pangkor Island, to do documentation for industrial heritage setting. So we look into anchovy fisheries and boat making industries through 2 years of documentation of the trades. And we posted a question: should things only be preserved in museums when they no longer exist? So we set up a living museum thinking that we should start preserving industrial heritage before it's gone. Then we tried an effort of putting up a museum while in the working of industrial heritage setting to try to introduce knowledge to the general public. So with this effort, then Bai Qi from Look Portwell came to us asking our interest on another coastal community where it's Kuala Sepetang that she's been working with for 10 years. So following a decade involvement with the community, maybe I'll get Bai Qi to share with us what prompted her the decision to initiate documentation effort around the charcoal industry now. Maybe Bai Qi can share us like why would she approach us to do a documentation over charcoal industry?
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. I'm Tai Chi. Yeah, I'm actually I was born in Penang, but I love to join in with the Kuala Sepetang for my past 10 years. And we start with this Look Portwell is one of the non-government organization which is registered lah. But we have been established in 2014. Yeah. So last year actually we are celebrating our 10th anniversary. We call it Relook Portwell. For the previous past 10 years, actually, we are more focusing on the education, especially to the kids on the mangrove charcoal and how the fishing livelihood happening in within their own homeland. Yeah. And then starting for last year, we are rethinking on how can we expand this community which have been, people will say is some sort like charcoal industry is some sort like sunset industry. But to us, to me, is I'm thinking this is actually a part of a new opportunity we can looking into it. So we bring into how we can revitalization this aging community of fishing village for this sustainable growth is one of my thinking last year's. And we invite actually a few of the expert artists, and UCSI is one of the partners that I wanted to work with them because I'm looking for their works, the students and the lecturer works on this Bangkok Lively Museum. And I realized that actually charcoal industry, especially on this working together with this sustainable growth on this mangrove forest, actually we can bring in another new opportunity. And this is what we are doing now is on Nisiap is a mangrove dyeing, mangrove bark dyeing, which is this is part of our own Look Port Well main focus point this years or the past few years. And one of the trilogy of sustainable management that we are looking into is we have three parts that we hope to work with for upcoming 5 years. For the first, as actually we have done last year's, is we have built some of the storytelling travel kits on charcoal and also our Look Port Well community on together with the mangrove and fishing industry. And then the second part, this is the medium part, is a medium term is we hope that we can collaboration with some researchers to looking on how mangrove and charcoals can support each others in this environment. So we realize that charcoal and mangrove and also the dyeing, natural dye is actually interrelated and part of the important industry. And so we hope that the researcher will come in and then we can work together to looking for new opportunities and maybe for some outcome that we don't know what will happen, but maybe we can bring it something new to community also to be new research things. So for coming long terms is actually we hope that the charcoal industry can bring in more added value, not only the charcoals that are the first raw materials, but actually some waste on these charcoals. Actually we have a lot of new things or valuable things that we can bring in and explore new products ideas, and then actually we can create local value and bring our youth generation in Kuala Sepetang to come back to their hometown to work together for this community. This is what our Look Port Well is doing right now. Yeah, just a short introduction.
Okay, thank you, Pai Chi, for sharing us what Look Port Well have been doing from the past. I think it aligns with our direction of research from the previous coastal community, where we set path into a sunset industry, looking at industrial heritage industry, finding new possibilities through our previous research with Living Museum. So we start to think that is there something else that we can do with this project? That's why the Reimagine Charcoal project come about. And then we realized that the charcoal production in Kuala Sepetang actually focuses on exports with limited local applications. This might be a challenge and making it a sunset industry, and we are looking at any potential of localizing it in terms of use, in terms of the art, architecture, and community initiative in these possibilities. So we have applied through the culture, through connection grants from British Council, and look how we could reimagine the use of charcoal in the localized context. So the project came about because of the site. I think it all started with Kuala Sepetang. With that, let me introduce a bit of the background of the site. So Kuala Sepetang located a bit northwest from Malaysia along the Straits of Malacca on these red dots here. So this location is actually a 40,000 hectares of mangrove forest located along this shoreline. And we are proud to actually share that this Mata mangrove forest is actually one of the most well-maintained mangrove forests in the world, told by the forest department to us. The mangrove forest along the shoreline forms a protection to the land from the tsunami waves. If you look at the black spots here, it becomes a shoreline protection of our land in a natural setting of a Malaysia context. So the mangrove tree has a general lifespan of 20 to 40 years. It cannot grow too old as it might fall and collapse. Hence, a healthy mangrove forest needs to be sustainably managed by our forest department to then through silviculture and thinning operation. Hence, the local charcoal industry plays an important role in this operation. So how they do about this is the forest department manage the forest by 30 years plan system. With every year, they harvest 1,000 hectares of this light gray area. And leaving enough time to grow the trees in 30 years with 30,000 hectares of areas. So each year they will harvest 1,000 hectares and then move on to another plot, allowing it to grow in between. Then 10,000 of these black areas of the hectares of forest will be reserved for the tsunami protection. So we are now on the second cycle of the 30 years plan. We are almost close to 60 years now on this mangrove management system. So how they plant the mangrove forest is that on the first 15 years, they'll plant the trees 1.2 meter apart, a little bit more closely plant so that they could grow. In 15 years time, they'll harvest the tree to leave it a gap of 5 meter to grow into a longer tree up to the 30 years plan. So all these 15 years tree barks will then use for construction as stilts for the village as a foundation material. Then when they are growing to 30 years, they need to start cutting the plants and actually grow new plants. So by the time they cut the plants of a 30 years tree, they'll cut it into a 1.6 meter long logs. One tree logs could actually cut to about 16 logs, then will be shipped using the river canals into the land with all these 1.6 meter regular logs for then the charcoal industry to produce charcoal in Malaysia. So if you look at the context of Kuala Sepetang on the location of it, it's surrounded by a lot of green mangrove forest, and all these rivers and canals becomes the important riverway for the harvesting of the mangrove forest, reaching the land of the charcoal industries. So along with a zoom-in plan of Kuala Sepetang, you'll find the fishing village is located along the river mouth. And then the areas highlighted in reds are the charcoal factory locations that is connected by rivers and canals to little streams that transporting the mangrove barks, mangrove logs. So this is an video shortage that we have from the river canals to the 1.6 meter log being unloaded onto the land from the streams from Mr. Trust's charcoal factory. Okay, from now here, I'll let Doris to share more about the richness and resources that she could see through the current charcoal factory and the fishing village of Kuala Sepetang.
Thank you, Casey. So before we dive into the all things about charcoal, so I'd like to pose another question maybe to our local partner. So the key question is that when Kuala Sepetang is blessed with abundance of mangrove forests, I think that's we all able to see, through the map, through the sharing just now. But why did charcoal making of all trades become one of the keystone industry alongside of fishing activities? And how does this has shaped like the lifestyle or the livelihood of the villagers over the time? Aichi?
Sorry, actually the Kuala Sepetang people have been there for I think more than 100 years. Yeah, the local peoples. And then the charcoal making and then fishing village, all these they have been working together they have been worked together for the past 100 years. And but in 1960s or 70s, a lot of young people have been leaving their village. Yeah. So some of them they're not really coming back, and some, and then only left about, I think, if you hardly seen age 20s to 40 years old people who stay in the Kuala Sepetang. Mainly are old people or child or only a women's. So what we are doing now is actually we're thinking, can this charcoal, not only the charcoal making of mangrove forests, how can they preserving all these things together with the fishing village? Yeah, even they love the Kuala Sepetang, but they don't have any strength to maintain or to sustain their livelihood. Yeah, so they because of the economies, they rather to going out, and then they leave their children or their mothers or fathers to staying there. So this is what we are thinking. How can we do something with the main important industry in Kuala Sepetang, beside fishing village, is charcoal. Yeah, actually charcoal is the main things working together with the mangrove forest. Yeah, this is what just now Casey already introduced. The charcoal management, well management of the mangrove is because of this charcoal for 30 years charcoal making. So we that's why look quite well, we start to rethinking how we're going to reshape or to make the charcoal to become one of the important things to let the young generation understand. Actually, for the past 10 years, we realized that the young generation, they never go into this charcoal factory in Kuala Sepetang. They never been into, without our education camp for the kids to bring them in, they never been to there. So this is how they know nothing about this charcoal and the mangrove forest related with them. So this is what we are start doing to make this charcoal to be part of their livelihood. Means that charcoal everything must be some products that they can see, they can smell, and even they can think about it in future times. Yeah. But we only, what we can do is only through the education in our part lah, in our side. Yeah. I'm
Thank
not
you.
sure I answering your question or not.
You do. So basically, yeah, that's why also we are very thankful for Mr. Chua to allow us to come into the charcoal factory. So Mr. Chua has been advocating, the charcoal to different type of tourists over like the years. And now that we have a more safe space to actually do some research about the factories and about the environment, and as well as any potential of a new material from charcoal. So on the next slide, we look into, so this is a condition of a charcoal factory. So like what mentioned by Casey just now is that the rivers that are leading into all the different charcoal factories, so 2 out of 3 streams are man-made and is excavated to serve the charcoal factories in Kuala Sepetang, and to allow the boat access, especially only for the mangrove logs to be transferred from the deep within the inside of forest to the factories. So as what Mr. Chua always said on site is that he said that the mangrove wood is so dense that it's a type of wood that if you throw into the water, it will sink. It would not float. So so a special made boat has to be been constructed. So in order to transfer the wood through these narrow streams into the factories only when it's on the high tide. So contextually, to maintain these narrow streams of boats, so the riverbanks here are reinforced with the stacks of tires and to protection of the boat as well. And it line up with the mangrove logs at the edge. So which also function as how when the unloading of a mangrove towards the edge of the tides, the riverbanks, that it can sort of tidally actually line up on the edge of the riverbanks. So in some factories, the mangrove logs are cut and processed right at these receiving areas. So here the mangrove chips and wood dust accumulate on the ground, that also transforming the texture of the floor almost like a fallen leaves on top of it. So further in, you will find the different storage area for the pre-baking logs. And over the time, the logs that takes on the reddish tint due to the mangrove will soak under the natural moisture onto the hue of the mangrove wood and also the soil underneath. So on the next slide, yeah, so zooming up, we will start to notice a sign of the baking and the heat, where the streams of the smoke seeping out from the gaps of this jack roof. So, but what is equally striking is how the building envelope has aged over the time. So the wooden walls and metal roof are visibly charred and bear the years of the smoke and the heat. So some of the texture of the material seem to have been shaped uniquely by the site itself, of the condition of the environment. So the wood are obviously darkened and charred on the surface and blistered in the pattern that you won't able to find elsewhere. At the same time, the metal sheet on top of the roof has been curved and warped into the shape and with the constantly exposure of the heat. So there's also some signs of, on the next slide, there's also some signs of the heat and the residue of the charcoal ashes that falls onto the maybe it's combined with the acidic vapor that released by the mangrove wood during the baking process that react with the surrounding materials in very unexpected ways. So some of the materials is even that it's hard to identify what is the original state of the material it is. So over time, this unique chemistry has created a surface and textures and patinas that rarely seen elsewhere. Yeah. So on the next slide, so from this another view, we're able to see the journey from the riverbank into the heart of a charcoal factory. So as seen, the dock site is layered with the open stacks of mangrove logs that press to the ground. So some of them are even like flashed to the ground over the time. And in the past, the workers will strip the barks of the logs that allow them to bake more efficiently. But throughout these few years, most of the factory has then started to bake the mangrove logs with the skin, so that the skin that peeled off then turned into a byproducts of a biochar that collected for the agriculture usage. So on the next slide, coming into the charcoal factory, so you can see there's actually no change of level from the outside of the external near the riverbank towards the inside of the charcoal factory. So there's no concrete flooring, there's no clean separation as well. So just the continuity of the earth. So the mud of the uneven floor extends seamlessly from the outside to the inside. Would anyone like to guess why is there no concrete floor inside? So I think there's one thing is that it's not an oversight. So in fact, the mud floor that transition from the outside to inside plays a very crucial role into maintaining the natural thermal buffer. So help to regulate the intense heat that generated inside the building. So instead of any other flooring materials. So as you step further in, the air will be thickened and you begin to feel the radiant heat and from the kilns and also the smell. So just now Paichi mentioned about the smell of Kuala Sepetang. So I think for all visitor that has visited Sepetang before has a very strong of a spirit of that place. Maybe I can ask Keita or Charlotte that has been here on January. So what is your impression of when you step into this place? Because we have been online and shared about this for quite a while. Keita, you are muted.
Hi.
Yeah, so we have been online for a while that discussing about Kuala Sepetang, looking at the images. But is there any difference when you first step foot to the
Difference. As a space, you mean
as your perception before and
before. Okay. I was looking at this.
during our site visit?
Well, I think, when we are kind of, started to, Doris told us about this project and we started to thinking of going. I think that it's very different in a way. In terms of scale of production, we didn't really expect that kind of really massive scale of productions. And also that I think space was very kind of strong, but it's very dynamic. Because in a way we looked a little bit about what's the kind of charcoal industry in UK. It's completely different scale, and of course UK is not have much productions, and it's just the kind of scale of this is a very astonishing. But it's also kind of the closeness to the village, I guess, in relationship to village and mangrove forest. All these things are lot to discover by listening on the specialist, the people from charcoal factory to mangrove like forestry and people in the mangrove. So that's Yeah, we change. I really change the perception in terms of how these things are so integrated within the kind of daily life of the village. Because before, I think we are more looking at, okay, what we can do with the charcoal. It's just about thinking about the material, but I think it's not just only about the kind of material, but about like whole kind of economies and cultural kind of aspect of the village are kind of key, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the kind of presence of it within the settlement and within the landscape is something that you couldn't quite imagine without experiencing it. Because it's bound into everyday relationships, but it's also traces of it are visible across the landscape and across the settlement. So I think that's something that we were really interested in, those interdependencies.
Let's see, maybe you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so maybe I can share a little bit on the vernacular wisdom of the site. So where this is the kiln that are built for the bake of charcoal. So basically, this kiln are all built purely with the arrangement of the brick without the framework of the dome and the kiln. So basically, so with the brick, so it will then all sealed off with the last layer of mud to cover all to just seal off the entire kiln before it's baked. So over the years, when the use of kiln over different batches, that sometimes it will result with some of the cracks on the wall. So how it is, it's just the workers will just patch it up with the mud, so until it's able to still functioning as a kiln. But what you can see is that on the release of the on the vapor from this kiln, the hole from the kiln, you're able to see that some crystallizations of the charcoal that is on top of the layers of the mud. So basically there's some different type of layers of the charcoal onto, let's say, for the wood that constructed the entire factory. Sometimes they use the mangrove logs of the 15 years to actually be part of a structure. But you can see also the mangrove logs are seriously charred into black color compared to the mangrove, which is when it's still fresh. So on the next slide. Yeah, so the mangrove logs will be arranged outside of the kiln before it transferred in for the batch of the process. So basically, during that time, there's a lot of transitional spaces around the factory that goes by the different timing of each batch of the baking of the charcoal. So the change of landscape as well. So on the next slide, is you can see that it's from all the surrounding of charcoal factory that you can see the stack of logs and the stack of the roots of the mangrove that will go on and off from all the different sites. So on the next. So this is just some example of how the charcoal effect that is naturally already formed over the years, over the time of charcoal industry is ongoing. So inside the kiln, you're able to see that how does the charcoal are gradiently fall from the lighter to the ground to the darker on the ground. But on the side, on the external, and then you're able to see that it's actually gradiently up, that where the darker side of the charcoal effect is actually go on top of to the surface on top. So on next slide, then there's a different type of textures so within the left one is the textures inside the kiln of a charcoal kiln. But on the side is that you can still see that how intact it is with the fishing village and activities, where most of the ground are paved by the shells that mix with the charcoal and the soil and the ground. So on another slide. Then you can see actually on the ashes of the charcoal and towards the the crushed charcoals, the powdered charcoal that mix to be a textures on the floor of the factories. And also on the right side is where the chips of the mangrove bark or the cutting of the mangrove, and that layered on onto a new ground of textures around the factory. Yeah, so on the recent years, some of the factories in Kuala Sepetang has then also developed some of the byproduct to be able to use locally. So basically on some of the factories that started to actually gather biochar as part of their byproducts to be used as for the agriculture around. And also then with the steam of mangrove, that it condensed into a use of vinegar. So mangrove vinegar are extracted through the process of the baking of the charcoal. So on the next slide. So basically, we wanted to actually ask and pose the question to everyone is that how might this unique environmental conditions of charcoal production offer new ways of working with materials? So there's one good example is actually ongoing by the community of Look Portwell. So in the past that the skin of the logs are removed. So during the baking process for the more efficiency of the baking of the charcoal. So in the past that all this sort of the waste, which is the bark of the mangrove logs, then are collected by the fishermen, and then they will actually extract dye to be able to coat it onto their cloths and also on the cotton nets, fishing nets that they use to strengthen the clothes. So they call it in Chinese, they'll call it 水衣水裤, which is water shirt and water pants, so that it's more like a strengthened fabric for them to go on to fishing activities and go into the water to be a little bit more toughened fabric. So with this, so there's a group in Lukport Welt that they tried to actually revive the culture by turning this into workshops and also a fashion design or fashion fabric usage into using the extracted dye called nisiap and into a different type of coating, colorings, dye usage. So I think that's all from my side, Casey.
So with this side matters on the conversation that we have today on this discourse, we actually also did a documentation in documenting the richness of the site in terms of those wood logs that forms part of the flooring system of the streams and the side of the streams, and then the textures of the wood chips along the areas where cutting happens, and the context of the wood logs then moving into the kiln with the sand condition of the flooring of the charcoal factory. Also, the wood log that piles up, I would say the wood roots that is actually the fire material along the side of the charcoal factory, also alongside with the walls that you'll find this richness of materials that is available within this context of charcoal industries. That then we started to document what we find along a system of horizontality and verticality, that along the street from the concrete pavements over the stream banks, over the log pavements, soil and wood bugs happens to fall like fallen leaves, like how Doris described it. Then brick pavements that going into the factory that you find soil and ash into it. Ash and wood dust happen between the in front of the kiln, then going into the soil and the clay used for the kiln, the clay bricks that was broken apart sometimes for the layings of the wood logs, and a little bit of the clay brick powders, going into the little streets of brick pavement for forklift and all the heavy equipments and the waste burn brick and the clay. So I would find that the site is actually having a very great material richness in terms of its horizontality and the verticality through this charcoal production and industry. So from that short section across the site, across the factory. We also look at what we can get along the long elevation of the charcoal factory in terms of its environment and context of the grass field, the vegetation, timber cladding, and the zinc roof that piles along with this context. So this is what we have gathered and documented by far. With this, we would also pose this question to Mr. Cha that now that we have actually have so many thoughts about the resources and the condition of the charcoal factory, what additional potentials do you see in the charcoal industry beyond its current production and practices?
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yeah, so a short introduction on Mr. Chai is that he is one of the factory owners of My Charcoal Factory that opens up his factory for us to visit. We're really grateful with his welcoming us doing the research on this. Then we get to see and document that much of the charcoal factory by far. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, let me introduce myself. My name is Mr. Chua. Family name is Mr. Chua. My name is KY, short name. I'm actually the third generation. My grandfather, way back in the 1940s, meaning that our factory is already more than 80 years old. We have been producing charcoal since then, and we are still maintaining the traditional way. So, producing charcoal, I think the initial thought that everyone will have is charcoal is for you to use it to burn, for barbecue, for cooking, right? So that was the initial usage for charcoal. But as we go along, because charcoal is what they call that is carbon, and it has it can be transformed to be used for other purposes as we go along. But majority of the usage is still basically for barbecue and cooking. But as we all know, for cooking and barbecue using charcoal, this is already, people already start using less of this because you are having a convenience of using your gas, your electric stove to cook and so on and so forth. So, but of course, charcoal, producing charcoal, it relies on the forest. And as you know, forests will not grow more. Usually, people will convert forests into other things like, to development for and so on and so forth. But and we are very lucky in Matang mangrove forest. We preserve the mangrove forest, and we still keep the 40,000 hectare. But of course, if we don't bring the product or bring the charcoal to the next level, continue on this current usage of only barbecue and cooking, we will be losing out. And then a lot of people or those villagers that are staying there, they will move out, right? So we will have to bring up the level of usage of the charcoal. So basically, for my charcoal, my site, I do development to bring it to the next level, which is some personal healthcare product like soap, shampoo, and also we also use the vinegar that is produced as a mosquito repellent, and also we can use it to treat fungus, and also for plants, and so on and so forth. So these are really move into the next level of usage of charcoal. But of course, there'll be more that we can do, and probably I would say that we are working with our local universities to bring it to the next level, maybe towards some other more valuable carbon product like maybe graphite and so on and so forth. So these are things that we have to do, continuing doing research, and then research doesn't come cheap, So basically, people just want to take the fruits, but those people behind, like the university, like you guys that are in the universities, are bringing in ideas and bringing in the research capability to bring us to the next level. So that is something that is very good. To think out of the box, to move something that is current to the next level where it will benefit not only the local, and also probably in overall to other, higher end industry as well. So I think we have a lot of potential, and well, thank you for participating in all this. So I think that's all my sharing on that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chua. I think it's very interesting that from the conventional charcoal production that is used for cooking and also barbecuing, that you look into other products that coming out from this industry, like byproducts for vinegar that can use for mosquito repellent and also antibacterial treatments, then personal care, so that it could start to localize. Then we will think along this way, reimagine charcoal, of how we could then further reimagine the use of localizing this charcoal through this project with the community, probably. So thank you, Mr. Chua. Moving on with our exploration in January, Keita and Charlotte came over to Kuala Sepetang, and we had a 5 days workshop with one to 2 days preparation in the university, in UCSI University. Then we went into the site to start walking around the site, collecting materials, and we explored some intuitive material experiments. So from this point onwards, I'll invite Keita to actually share with us certain things that we actually explored during the workshop.
Yeah. So this is kind of initial, I think first workshop we did in Kuala Sepetang in a visit in January. I think this was rather very intuitive test of the students went to the area around charcoal factory, pick up any potential resource that can be used to mold into a form of cubes or like something solid material, or also kind of more rendering, kind of plastering kind of materials. I think it was very like interesting for us as not as only about the result, but I think the students kind of very free kind of energy to kind of produce all sort of different type of experiment. And perhaps I think in this case, we are trying to kind of use charcoal, or like all the bits of charcoal, or could be biochar, as they are, without any kind of firing or baking, as to kind of store in a way the carbon as an idea. But also we're trying to kind of see not necessarily factory area as a kind of place to find resources, but more expanding potentially to find perhaps something like seashells related to fishery, as we saw one of, like, not one, quite few of the fisherman kind of place that they have lots of seashells they've been used, and they've been being around. And we also saw, looks like kind of local people use those shells onto the pavings and so on. There's some way we're still kind of looking into it, but to expand our knowledge to explore more different kind of combinations. And also, I think we looked at more like regional kind of the clay, which they used for filling the kind of kilns as a kind of, most of them as a kind of base materials. And I think this in a little bit in mind, we gone back to UK, and we wanted to kind of do similar kind of intuitive test with our students in the UEL, which we didn't really have. We didn't have really charcoal, but we bought the biochar as a kind of test sample to explore. I think in this time, mostly we tried a different kind of aggregate and sand and seashells. The clay, I think we have to use somehow that been already kind of bought, and more like from south, I think, of England, like some clay powders and white clays and stuff, just more to see the color of charcoal. Again, I think this is still ongoing. And when in June, we have another workshop as a part of London Festival of Architecture, which we start investigating more into the solid kind of blocks and materials with biochar. I think for us, I think in UK, it's quite opposite in terms of the charcoal production, because I think in that country, I think 90 to 95% of charcoal being imported. So there is very small kind of production domestically. And they are quite like small, like micro producers. And I think they are also looking at more kind of sustainable way of producing the charcoals in relation to also producing along with producing biochars alongside. And I think that's something that when the Colllab are coming in June in UK, we will visit all together to kind of further our researches. Okay. And I think this is the liminal conditions, interdependency, adaptability. I think this is something our impression and reflection from our visit. Not only about charcoal factory, but it's more about the Kuala Sepetang as a village and how we find out or like have the impression of the place. I think the mostly something really striking is about was the kind of presence of mangrove forest and this river in relation to all the fisherman village, which is alongside of the river. And again, also the charcoal factory, which was, earlier on being introduced next to the river. So this sort of interdependency between the river and mangrove forest and also on the fishery and also ecotourism as a part of the whole thing, they're also dependent. And I think that's something that we find it very interesting when we started to discover. But at the same time, we also saw, the talking to Mr. Cho about, he told us about kind of fluctuation of, for example, the charcoal price because of or dependent on kind of Japanese market, for example, or also the kind of the ways that climate change might have impact. So I think that all the things are all interrelated, but at the same time they're also in a kind of some kind of moment of like shifting. I guess that's why we thought it was something that's very interesting for us to contribute other opinion. And how can I go next one? Yeah, I think this is more observation from daily life. I think the first place when we arrived there, we are taken to eat a lunch, some very delicious noodles, and in that lunch place, soon kind of closed, and we are taken to different place for the dinner. And the next day we went to a big space for the breakfast, and it is happens quite everywhere, but at the same time I was quite impressed that somehow it's a very small village, but there's so many kind of place to eat, and somehow I started to think that also kind of the way of I don't know, it's more only speculation, but the kind of economic system to kind of sort of like a mutual support between the businesses. And I think that's aspects, but also very kind of strongly, left me some strong impression. And I think other part thing is, again, it was more about the way things been adapted and been used, and this kind of flexibility and sort of like very, in a way, dynamic. And in a way, the restaurant as well, they open very quickly, closed, and become just a empty space, and next moment it's open again. And there's something about this fluidity and dynamic kind of spatial change, but also the way people adapting. It was very kind of interesting. Next one, please. This was like one of the observation which we are quite fascinated about, kind of the depths of space from the street to the river, going through one of those places they harvesting all the seashells, and so all the processing, packaging, the office and kitchen, storage, they are almost in continuous space and a very long, deep space. And in a way, this sort of in-between condition was quite fascinating somehow, because when we are in the street, we almost didn't think that we are next to the river, and because of this kind of depths. But when you're in this in-between zone, it was quite obvious how these things are so close to each other. Next, please. And also that makes us a little bit think about how, what would be the impact on climate change and even those economic shift, not only to kind of cultural changes and economical changes, but also in the sort of those daily spaces and operations. Yes. And I think this is very kind of speculative. It's a kind of the student project. We run the studio in UEL for second, third year students, and we've been working on the idea of land process city, and which pretty much based on the idea of the local resources and cultural productions and in time frame. So this couple of years, we've been sited in kind of coastal area on the west coast of Ireland, and it's a very different context comparing to Kuala Sepetang, but also we identify it's a very different climate and weather, and it's a very, wet and windy. And but there's something that we thought of something interesting in terms of the resources that we can see in common, the type of seaweed and the seashells we've been testing to make some sort of blocks, installation blocks to kind of detaching from the roof. But also as a kind of as a more social context, that's kind of, for example, like young migration to the city is a kind of same sort of issue, how those young population will be shrinking over the time. So that I saw that something that's quite interesting in terms of showing all this project a little bit. That this was particularly looking at the seaweed and the kind of seaweed harvesting as a way of kind of educations, and the kind of eventually kind of, it's a very speculative, so it's nothing happening in reality. It's but students explored as in kind of how the seaweed can be, means to kind of create sort of cultural kind of productions, but at the same time it's a part of the building materials, and how the building of like such roof can be kind of built with the kind of local kind of engagement. So it's kind of participatory, and it's a kind of speculative strategy. But I think this sort of strategy really somehow, sort of reflected as in kind of looking at Kuala patterns, and like as Paichi said about, she's very kind of working on educations and using, like art as a medium and or traditional kind of method as a kind of medium to kind of educate. And I think there's something that we thought could be very interesting between this. Next one, please. I mean, this is again that different project, but it's another things we thought it's quite important to think about is the time frame. think that's one of the students, again, the very speculative project about kind of how planting of trees over the years and years and years when the building is no more needed because it's still remain as a kind of forest. There's something to even. I mean, this is a very speculative things, but again, in thinking about this like 30 years cycle of like mangrove forest, and also there's a lot of aspects about kind of slowness of things about making charcoal probably takes probably nearly a month, including heating and cooling, and all this time is space. Think about, and the other more like quick things about how dynamic the town is. I mean, there's things about the time that we just kept on kind of thinking about it as an impression. It's like, it's nothing in a way to have a kind of suggestion or anything, but I just thought it would be quite interesting to show it and have a discuss in relation to the project.
All right, I think that's about it from Kita, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we are coming to the first part of site methods sharing conclusion at this point. So this then brings us into the next discussion of what would be the next possibilities of reimagining charcoal. Part of the discussion today, we have academicians, researchers, artists, industry partners, factory representatives, local NGO with us today. So we would like to open up to the floor for a discussion among all of us through these two questions. Reimagining charcoal through context because of the environment and contextual richness. How might the contextual environment of vernacular traits like charcoal making open up new potentials for reimagining charcoal? Not necessarily by creating entirely new materials, but by uncovering unexpected uses, aesthetics, or meanings in what already exists and translating them into new possibilities. One thing is by the environment and context, thinking about what are the new possibilities. The other question that we wanted to pose is rethinking new material in vernacular practices. What does new material mean within the context of vernacular knowledge beyond conventional building materials? And how might we begin to understand materiality through elements like dye, scent, heat, residue, ephemeral or immaterial process that shaped by time and transformation. So we gathered these two questions today for our discourse later. We'll take a 5 minutes water break from here. 5 minutes later, probably by 10 minutes past 9, we can then have a discussion over these two topics by all the participants today. So with that, I will put on some videos for 5 minutes of water break, and then we'll see each other back of 10 minutes past 9.
Okay, welcome back everyone. So hope it was a good break. Yeah. So for our next session, the speakers can turn on your cameras again, but I'll be just giving a quick introduction on our future planning. So yeah, actually reimagine charcoal. This is our second discourse. Previously we started with Kuala Sepetang and just want to share our future planning. So for the next few months we will have consecutive discourse 3, 4, and 5. The next one will be an online one talking about intuitive making. So hopefully more on our material exploration progress. And the next two will be a physical showcase event, and hopefully we have a discourse session. But both of them also have a team out already. So hopefully in June we can do our London. Sorry, we will have our London showcase, and it'll be more than charcoal. So hopefully we have a bit more of an outcome to be showcased in UEL. And the next one will be in Kuala Lumpur, probably in UCSI or British Council. But it will be the final discourse on reimagining charcoal itself. And I realize some of us that joined the Zoom today might not have registered yet, but maybe you joined through the Zoom link. So if you're interested to stay connected or updated in our future planning, feel free to scan the QR code on the corner. So you will be looped into our email as well. And I think I'll ask our admin to drop the registration link in the chat also. So feel free to sign up in the link so you can stay in the loop for our future updates. So yeah, I think we're going to start the second session. I'll hand it back over to Casey.
Okay, thank you, Gwen. Taking over from here, just an idea about these two questions that we are asking. Earlier, we are talking about the reimagining charcoal project, as in how to localize the material or the new possibility of this charcoal industry. So the two questions that we're posting now, we are thinking, since we are from the architecture background, what could we do in terms of exploration? Could we engage the community to hands-on making some material or making some art that is related to the material or the context of the place, and have some life built together as a project in future in localizing the material. So this discourse here on the site matters and what would be our next steps would actually be giving us an insight. What could we potentially do with reimagining charcoal to get the community come together in the perspective of art, architecture, and also participations. Then we posted the question of reimagining charcoal through context. How might the contextual environment of vernacular traits like charcoal making open up new potentials for imagining charcoal? Could we then make materials by the environment that is naturally charred by the heat of the context of the charcoal factories, or translating them into new possibilities, getting community together to get their hands into making some materials in the context of charcoal factory is probably something that we are lining up with these questions. So yeah, Doris, do you have anything that you wanted to add on?
Yeah, basically for this session, we hope that we can have more of a suggestion or direction that we can actually post to proceed on our findings on our next parts of reimagining charcoal. Our team are actually working closely with the communities to try to also realizing some of the type of participatory projects that will be actually go on site together. And that's why we invited like most of you to be in this group and to share maybe your thoughts or your experience with us, and we can sort of see in the future how would we able to collaborate towards like what Baichi is always mentioning to us as our local partner is that after 10 years Kuala Sepetang finally are ready to receive more and more of the different types of research. So in our group here, we invited practitioners and academicians that from architecture or from arts that maybe can share some thoughts with us on these two main directions of the questions.
Yeah, do not feel shy. If you would like to speak up, just have your mic and camera on. Then do a short introduction about yourself, and we'll get our team to spotlight you for a little bit. It can also be question. It doesn't have to be an idea or any thinking, but we are posting up a discussion now. So anyone would like to take this discussion? Okay, probably with no one starting the ball, I can pose a question to Mr. Chua. Mr. Chua, are you still around?
Yes, I'm around.
Yeah, hi. So maybe a bit of asking you, could the byproducts of and the condition of the factory, like the kiln heat, charcoal dust, and the bark, be reimagined as a new value-added materials or a surface treatment? And if so, would you be open to offering a wall or space for us to test a time-based material in future?
Okay, anything is possible. It's just we do not know how much what do you call that, the waste that we have that can be converted. So you can try, because we know that abundant one will be charcoal, because charcoal is what we produce, but the byproduct is limited, because we try to reduce waste. I mean, as little as we possible to have those waste. We want to get as much charcoal as possible. So the only thing that I'm looking at is that the material or the waste that you need, whether it's sufficient to be value turned into value or not. That's the only thing. But you all want to try to come up with ideas, I'm more than happy to assist.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chua. I think one thing that we haven't been sharing about is that the charcoal, the whole production itself, nothing is waste. Everything is actually has its value. That's the beauty about charcoal production, right? From the skin, the bark, to every little biochar is actually, even the ash has got certain values to it, which is interesting. Yeah. But how much we could produce and how much of value we can get from that is open up for us to explore further. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chua. I think it could be interesting if we put up some material testing along the side and look at how this heat and environment would actually change a certain condition of material. Could be a new potential that exploring. But in this question, I know that today we have industry material experts like Conspec, Randall, and Wenji from the home clusters that Bai Chi invited. Are you guys around? If yes, can I have you turn on your camera and also your mic?
We still have a hand from the crowd. Anastasia, do you?
Yeah, Anastasia, do you mind?
Oh, hi. Hi, I had a question, but didn't want to interrupt now the flow of the conversation, so I can keep it for later if it makes more sense.
No worries. You can drop the question now. It's casual. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Amazing presentation and project. Thank you so much. So inspiring and amazing. I'm an associate professor in architecture in London, UEL. I work with Keita and Charlotte. My question has to do with this so intriguing questions regarding what else could be done with charcoal or the byproducts, the materials. And I was wondering if you have initiated a series of consultations with local groups, students, industries, and so on, because I guess each different group would bring something different to the table. So different types of workshops could contribute to the brainstorming and to the development of new ideas from a different angle. Like local students or also students from the UK through collaborative projects could imagine potential uses, which some may prove successful, some not. At the same time, local people with a range of different skills through workshops and meetings and consultations could bring their own skills and deep knowledge of the materials and of the place and bring a different angle to it. Then scientists and product designers and people who work with have a different understanding of the materials, like the chemistry of the materials, the physical properties of the materials, could contribute from a different angle. So I was thinking how this network of different types of consultations could be mapped, and hence next steps move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Anastasia. So maybe I can take this, Casey, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so basically, I think we have different parts of participatory programs. Actually, some we run together with Look Park Well, which is our local partner. So there's one showcase I think is quite enlightening. Is during our first hands-on experience with the materials on January when Keita and Charlotte is with us. Is that when we do the showcase of all the types of material where the students sort of like mesh it, it together with the mud, with the clay, with different type of materials, with the shells that being there, has then, light up a conversation with the locals onto how the locals was using the shells as whitening products for them in the past. And also for some of the villages, they mentioned about how the shells are the plastering material in the past where they use because they have so abundance of the shells. So I think that is a type of interaction only be able to ignite the kind of knowledge that is coming from the local. So in our room here, we invited not purely onto material exploration team, but at the same time we have like our sort of friends from arts, and we have also the industry that are currently working on ram earth and concrete sort of products that come along with us to have a discussion over here. Of course, we tried to have the different ways of mapping up our innovation maps. So towards some is more towards the locality, some maybe towards more on the material explorations. That's one notable one is that we're trying to work with our material researchers here with Dr. Yip from our engineering departments. So for now, we try to open up only about 3 pillars for now. But I think from Keita's side, Keita also mentioned that maybe we can also look into the different types of partnering when we are in UK.
Partnering, I mean,
A type of collaborative workshop.
in UK, you mean in terms of exploring the materials?
Yeah.
I think it is, we can look kind of, I think in UK, I think what we thought interesting is to first to understand maybe sort of production of charcoal and biochar from the factory that they do in here, like very small scale. I think it's not necessarily comparative because I think it's just the aim of production is very different. But I think there's something like we can definitely learn in terms of how they produce, but also what they can do with those materials. And I think there are many kind of biochar companies in UK that maybe we could look into, as there are some of them producing only biochar for the carbon credit, I think, to offset, right? And so I think that's something they produce in a way, like in order to offset, I guess, the carbon emissions in that way. That's something, I thought would be quite interesting.
Yeah, I think recently we have made a visit to Conspec, one of our industry sort of visit. So Casey, would you think that we can share a little bit on
Yeah, definitely.
our
Yeah, so recently we paid a visit to Conspec that they are looking into ram earth wall
Randall is
and also biochar.
if Randall
Randall
is
is here, right?
Yeah, I'm here.
yeah.
Hi, Randall.
Hi, Randall. I'm not sure whether I can publicly share about, what you guys are experimenting. But can you maybe shed some light on, what is the type of sort of a sustainability materials that your company has started to look into based in
So
Malaysia?
for our company, we are mostly a buildings material company doing construction hardscapes, so walkways, floors and walls, facades and features. So as far as sustainable materials, so what we do, one of the things we are using is we use recycled glass, we use recycled concrete, recycled building materials, we use recycled clay bricks, so broken bricks, overburnt bricks. We find a way to reinsert it back into the building materials that we produce. So one of the more flexible materials that we produce is floor tiles made of concrete. So through this medium, we are able to do terrazzo looking tiles. We are able to mimic granite, and we are even able to create different looks and textures that normal tiles are not able to do. As far as rammed earth walls go, this one is still quite unique in the market. Usually, they're using it for ID works right now. A lot of restaurants like it. Recently, just today, my team was in Kampong Atak in KL to just do some refurbishment work on a ram earth installation we did for KL, for the municipal. So we are able to create a very natural, very low carbon footprint structures, non-load bearing structures for decorative purposes and partition purposes. And as far as charcoal goes, from our experiments and understanding is that we're able to use it to pigment and color concrete. So it gets to a very, very nice jet glossy black finish. But there is still testing needs to be done because we are worried about the stability of organic color in the concrete. So over time, our concern is that it'll fade. We are still testing that. So it's a very nice potential because in our experiments with inorganic black pigments is that the color shades vary a lot. And when we are moving into a place where people are talking about low carbon, zero carbon, and neutrality and circularity, then having things like organic pigments made out of locally sourced material, it becomes a point of conversation and something that is becomes suddenly worth looking into. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm guessing like the because I think we just met and we sort of share so much in last 2 days, and we just thought of like, because when your company has do so much R&D of the different types of materials and try out a lot of different ways of making it works. And what do you think, like if we look into a context like Kuala Sepetang and we have this abundance of different type of resources, do you think all these resources actually worth looking into?
I think the beauty of this industry that you have is that there is no waste at the moment. And because of the no waste kind of approach, then technically you are just looking at ways to or rather looking at new avenues to utilize whatever it is you have. So from what you shared earlier, I see that you have a lot of bark left. So in the biochar industry in the UK, they use a lot of these kind of turnings, shavings, and to turn it into biochar as an end product. That's one. And then on Saturday you shared that you can do the liquid for dyeing cloth and strengthening cloth. So, and from the looks of it, you have powder and ash. The powder, if the powder is still it still has that consistency and density, technically you could use it for pigmenting building materials as well. So like for us at Conspec, what I can try to do is I can use it to pigment my concrete, change the color, make it darker, or if the density is right, because I think you mentioned that the mangrove wood itself is so dense that it sinks. So if the density is right, then it could be a supplementary concrete material. But these are things that we need to try and test.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have some because I think on Bai Chi's side, her team has been developing quite a lot with the dye. So they found out that, with a different mixing of the dye, so you can start from brown turning into yellowish, and also when it turns into black in a certain conditions. So this is kind of like a chemical magics lah towards all the experiment through the time, through exposing to the light, through exposing to the air, yeah, and the different ways. Yeah, Bai Chi, do you think that this because previously it's all applied onto fabric, what do you think that if we were to try onto the different type of materials?
Actually, I just want to answering the just now the professor or the lecturer's question is about the research with the local community. I think first of all, I think the background of this Kuala Sepetang, actually the people who will still stay in Kuala Sepetang, mainly they will feel very left out from all this education, because in Kuala Sepetang we only have primary school. So whatever who can further studies, they will go to Taiping to studies, or their parents will send their kids out of this Kuala Sepetang. So who are living in this Kuala Sepetang, who studying in primary school, mainly are from Vietnamese marriage migrants, women who are coming from Vietnam and married to fishermen in Kuala Sepetang. So the education in Kuala Sepetang is really low, and the parents who are really educated, they will send their kids away already from Kuala Sepetang. So this is how the villagers living for the past 50 years. But the good thing is, in Kuala Sepetang, actually they have the old people, they have their own local knowledge which haven't been exposed or being exploring. Some sort like NISIAP actually is one of the main thing that we started exploring, and we get touch when Tian Ying, the one in the video, Tian Ying, who when she start interested in all this NISIAP, her father asking her why you are doing things that we have been done for 1950s or 1960s. This is the old fisherman doing. It's none of all your business now, because they feel like the fishermen feel like all these things have been left out, and people won't not going to earn any knowledges to them, to the new people or young generation, to earn more money. So this is part of the local knowledge that actually we're thinking we should bring back, and how we made this traditional way, the local knowledge of this traditional to be more, we're finding a new way for more modernization, and how we work together with the things. And this is how we want to bring in the charcoal factory as well. The kings that we know, how they built the kings is also one another stories that we need to exploring, actually, not only the materials. Yeah. So this is what we're thinking. The local people, they won't feel that they actually are good, or they are not confident with themselves. So that's why whatever we feel like quite fresh or opportunity for us, they won't think anything is so special to them. So for my past 10 years, actually, whatever I see, I'm very curious and tell them, oh, everything is gold to me. But to them, they will say, you are talking nonsense. You won't make everything done, even the charcoal and even the nisia. So this is why we have been going through for the 10 years, a long, long way to get the local people understand. And we start with the education to tell the kids, to tell the students, to tell the children. You have to understand what your ancestor doing, or your grandmother, your grandfather doing. And yeah, this is how we're going through the local knowledge from the old people's first lah. Yeah, this is how we started, and we hope that it will bring more. Beside the NISIAP, actually we are looking for fishing nets coming in. Yeah, we want to bring another education, is we want to let the kids to learn how to do the fishing nets. This is what my coming project, yeah, this year.
Yeah,
Okay,
just
maybe
yes.
I take from here, Doris. So, from just now, the question by one of our guests, Anastasia, that we might have so much in our plate to think. The question that posted by Anastasia was also our question, asking ourselves like, everyone would probably approach this reimagining charcoal from a different perspective. Would we miss out something if we don't step into the shoe of somebody else to think about the possibilities and just thinking from the ways of architects or just from the background of our industry? So that's why we have opened up this discourse for a more well-rounded discussion. Yeah, I have a hand here, Balkis, that has something to share. Maybe Balkis, you want to continue from here?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I
No
just
problem.
want to ask questions, but yeah, I'll introduce myself first. My name is Balkis. Uh, I would say I'm from a group called Colllab, a group of enthusiasts from multidisciplinary backgrounds. We're mostly a lot of artists in this group, and we are very interested in the potential pigments that we find in nature, both organic and inorganic. So the main members of our team is mostly printmakers and ceramic artists. So I'm asking actually on behalf of my friend Lisa, who had to leave, but she was here for the first half of the presentation. So one of the questions that, or actually the question that she posed, or more like ideas, I think maybe this is directed more towards Mr. Chua. Have you considered, have there been actually a ceramic artist that approached you for a collaboration? And the reasons why my friend Nisa, a ceramic artist, specifically asked is because the byproducts that you had, especially the ashes on the floor, those are the things that she said, oh, there's a potential ash glaze, especially for pottery. And the ash glaze to be specific, I think it's very much popular in our Eastern pottery, like Korean, Japanese, I think in China as well. So if I'm not mistaken, uh, the result of this ash glaze is more towards matte and a bit of like a speckled. So yeah, I think it's quite interesting. I asked her, is it is the value, is it expensive or is it affordable? And she said it's quite expensive. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's knowing that, I think it could help a lot of those who are interested and those who are in the pottery practice or ceramic practice. And yeah, I think we were having like a bit chat on the side and say, oh, would Mr. Chua and his team be interested in um uh, in collaborating with group of ceramic artists, maybe create like if we can perhaps procure those ashes, the byproducts, um, and potentially the space, because you have such a large kiln. And I think in Malaysia, especially, we don't have a lot of public or even kiln to rent for artists, especially in such a large sizes. And I think this could be like a potential ecotourism or even a cultural festival, especially those who are interested in pottery and ceramics. Yeah, those are my question and also sharing.
Okay. Okay, this is a very interesting question. Okay, talking about the ashes, basically, artists, there are a lot of artists that comes, but I think none of them requested for the ash to make into something else. But basically, actually, all our ashes are taken up, and it's so popular that those in the agricultural group of people, they will take whatever, how much we have, they will take. So we don't have much to have to supply. But I always say that if let's say there's something that become more valuable, meaning that you are moving up the hierarchy to create something that's higher in value, you have the priority. But of course, a lot of people want cheap and they want to take everything, and it's not fair to those that are, in the industry right now, that you still want to get at that price, but you want to take everything. Usually people will not. They will give it to those that already, in the current industry of those agricultural. We know them. They are good paymaster and so on and so forth. So on the business standpoint, if you can offer to a higher level, and then this could be turned into a special product that is coming from this region only, and then that could be a area that is explorable, right? And then of course, the kiln is basically used for making charcoal. But if you need to get a smaller kiln, we can explore. We can get the kiln master to specially come up with one special unit that to make it as to do your pottery, something like that. So anything is possible, as long as what we are doing is viable, right? If something that is just for play, I don't think so industry will want to get involved. So well, it's all possible. It's all possible.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cha. Thank you, Balkis. I think it's a very interesting conversation over economical sustainability with what we have in terms of the context. Like for us, value is always money and also other values that could be considered in this kind of perspective, right? Yeah, so if there's new added value given into the project, then that's reimagine charcoal and new possibilities that would come out. Since we have Balkis that's asking questions, also maybe other artists would like to share, like can the production environment itself or this sensory atmosphere in terms of heat, rhythms, and tools become part of the exploration of work? Maybe Mo'i?
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I was involved in a bit of I visited the charcoal factory a few times, and of course, talking about the charcoals, we did use a lot of charcoal to make drawings, and then but I don't think that we can use it directly as drawing materials. If let's say looking at the material itself. But I do think of like because I recently I researched about like how they actually makes ink, so I'm thinking to try to like making the charcoal powders, but mixed with some cow bone glue, which is what they use for making inks. So, but I haven't tried yet, but I think there's a possibilities, to explore the charcoals as artistic materials. But beside the materials, I would like to share a bit of like, thanks for the sharings. It's actually because I work with Colllabs with the previous project in Bangkok that I did have a very close connections with the boots buildings factories. But actually, so when we visited Kuala Sepetang, I would like to talk about like the vernacular practices. I think because when we look at the boat buildings, it's actually it's a very precious craftsmanship, but at the same time, it's actually it involves a lot of environmental problems because they produce a lot of waste, and then the deforestation is also a very main problem that about the boats buildings. But when looking at the charcoal factories and like how the Kuala Sepetang and how it's actually very surprised to see that how they maintain the mangrove forests. I mean, as a Malaysian, this is something that I feel very proud of that because like how they maintain and how they sustain the sources. And it's actually this is like a really vernacular, which I think vernacular for me is also one of the way that a very important for sustainability. Like you are using the materials that from the locals and also um, I mean depends on the locals and then produce no matter it's economic values or practical values for the locals. I think this is also part of a very important part about sustainability. But the thing is like we also know that the sad thing is about the charcoals is not really. I mean, as a Malaysians, we know that we don't really use charcoal in our everyday life. But I do think the vernacular process, like from the geographical location, like how they use the rivers and how they transport the woods, and then how they deliver to the factories, and then at the same time, there's no waste produced. Even the ash can be used for agriculture. So I think this is really, I don't know, I just feel like maybe we can be thinking about like, using charcoal, in our everyday life. I mean, of course, I mean, we use gas, use electricity stove, but the vernacular practices is actually give us a different perspective to think about like we actually depends a lot of like the materials or sources that or resources that are not really that we don't know where they came from actually. So and it's actually caused a lot of problems. And I know this is not only a everyday problem, but also the global problem. Like we depend on gas or depends on the petrols. But like if we can, I mean, from the education perspective, like to reintroduce about how vernaculars process. I think this is a very important process that people should know about this. Like, I'm not sure whether I explained it clear, but I do think this vernacular practices is really something that um, really important. I mean, if we want to talk about sustainabilities, I mean, to re-understand about vernaculars, I mean, practices, and at the same time, I think what's something that very precious in Malaysia, which we do have a lot of vernacular practices. I mean, no matter is that in architectures or in a lot of industries. I mean, if we can, I don't know, if we can do some things about this, I think this will be um, very important. I mean, to let the locals to understand about the historical background and also how our ancestors to work on this to create this kind of methods. I think this will be more. I personally think this will be more interesting to promote the charcoal or to promote about the industry as well. Yeah.
All right. I think that's a very interesting insight from artist perspective on vernacular practices from the process of making and also the value of it being vernacular in terms of materiality, making, participations, and all those knowledge that we have from the past. How do we then reinterpret this kind of layer of knowledge? Thank you, Mo-E, for that insight. We have another hand here from Gary. Gary, would you like to unmute yourself? Hi.
Hi. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, clear.
Great.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, just a brief introduction myself. I'm Gary. I'm also a lecturer based in Malaysia Institute of Art. Um, last year, I led a module called Collaborative Practice. In short, it's called Colllab as well. We explore low carbon material that ranging from bamboo, rattan, mycelium, recycled plastic, and also rare earth. So we came across the rare earth projects by Conspec as well at the Kampong Atta. When we were setting out the module brief, me personally had a hard time in identifying and navigating the goal, which perhaps leads to my questions to Colllab as well. It's a very interesting presentation earlier, but I struggle to understand the target because I don't know, maybe it's still navigating as well. Because it's kind of ranging into too many things. We're looking at the artist, looking into the ecological side, looking into the economic side. However, my question would be, how about the social side in terms of what are the resources and also capacity Kuala Sepetang could provide and afford? Meaning, when we look into dye, looking into scents, looking into different dimensions of the product, I am curious about the opportunity of pairing up with the existing ecosystem of talent or human resources in Kuala Sepetang, in a sense that what are the things that actually people have been doing and also in a way is easier to pairing up rather than thinking about building material, for example. Part of our module when we were doing the collab, when we look into RAMUP and everything, we were quite clear in terms of the direction that we wanted to change in terms of building technique. That we understand that the RAMUP is actually slightly problematic or a little bit more troublesome than typical concrete. And that's the reason why the concrete is still pioneering in this industry. So my question would be, what would be the alternative or in terms of from Colllab perspective? Because I think if you are looking at construction, I think it would be a challenge in a sense that there's a reason why bricks are still using until today. There's a reason why steel and other building materials are still very simplified today, that a lot of our workers can use it and do it without complicated SOP of using materials. So this is just my opinion. Maybe there are some questions, but I just realized that integrating the charcoal into building industry is gonna take some time. Which I'm not sure. Collab, what do you see the potential of breaking through the boundary of building materials?
Maybe let me share a little bit more onto what I learned from Kuala Sepetang through maybe 10 years. So I think I've been in Kuala Sepetang 10 years ago. There's one very significant change that I always, every time that I go, I notice the difference is that there is previously in the 10 years ago, the houses, the void between the houses is always filled up with a lot of rubbish. So this is very common in like fishing villages. But on these recent years, and when I traveled to Kuala Sepetang, I started to see that there's a quite major change of this in-between spaces of the houses that they start to pave onto with the shells that they have collected as a part of their, their waste material on the previously. But I think I start to speculate that what is the main change of like why do they started to see, you know, the use of shells into creating a landscape around Kuala Sepetang, around the fishing villages. And I only able to speculate because I haven't do a proper interview, but I only able to speculate because there is an influence of a previous also community project led by Eric and Mr. Teo that in the past that they create a sort of a community library. But I think that is the type of materials that they use to pave the entire floors when it are not paved with the new materials, not concrete or like any other flooring materials. For our project for now is that we try not to be set in stone that we're trying to do a building materials per se. We keep it a little bit open. So I think maybe that's where you get it from, like the entire sharing is not so particularly into we need to find a new material for building materials. But we see what is the potential of new materials that can go around to change a little bit of mindset of the people through the process of engaging as well. So on our next mission, or like maybe we project this project to be 2 or 3 years project. We are at the beginning of the first half year. And what we're trying to do is that on our second or a third mission that we can go and to do our second stage of engagement, we currently have different stakeholders that are willing to open up a different type of sort of like spatial typology. So we have a potential of maybe can converting a kopitiam, small kopitiams with a type of new materials. So the materials might not be as building material itself to start with, but maybe on to the type of renders, maybe on type of dye. That's why we also talk about the coloring and things like that, because some materials might not be as hard as a building materials to start with. So we start to expand the different types of potentials with different personnel basically is like different individual as well, different expertise as well. So we have engineered that we started to look into the potential of blocks. So like what you say is that, yeah, doing a ram earth, it might not be a fully well-resolved materials that we use outdoor, but at the same time, we try to see what is a different type of potentials that maybe it's not just purely looking it as like a ram earth wall as a ram earth wall outdoor, but if we have ram earth, so what is the potential of it can be made into maybe a space, maybe not a space, maybe just a change of mindset of people looking into certain materials.
Yeah, thanks. If I allow, I would ask the question is why do we wanted to reimagine? I think this is the key question that I don't know, I would impose to myself. Are we trying to motivate the young people in Kuala Sepetang to create more jobs opportunity? Are we trying to solve the rubbish issue? Are we trying to spread awareness about charcoal or about mangrove? Are we trying to highlight the issue about climate change? So I understand the solutions and also the resolutions. They are a lot and it's open for now. But I wonder from Collect's perspective, what is the main issue and also what's the interest at the moment? It seems like a lot of ecological side of the things, but I mean just my thought of it.
Maybe we can open up to Unit H as well. Maybe Keita, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah. I think I think you're right. And you know, we have maybe so many things at the moment on the table to look at. But I think for us, I think when we visited, we talking to Baichi about what she's been doing. And I think we are quite clear about, okay, we could make kind of contribution to the fact that the way she's want to educate the, local, maybe young generations and knowing about their heritage and the culture, or like even what they've done. And I think the part of us doing this is hopefully like, like the visualizing, make it more visible things in that way. And perhaps also being kind of seriously thinking about maybe sustainable aspects of things. I think that could be interesting reflections out of it. So I guess the products or things that we will be probably exploring is quite secondary. I think it's more about the act of doing it, maybe involving people to participating to do this could be more primary, I think, objective, I guess. Is that okay, Doris? Is that right? So kind of
Yeah, I think we've been
I guess.
thank you for the
Yeah.
question, Gary, because I think this is the part that we always been discussing as well, is that what is the reimagine part to be reimagined, you know, what is the things that we're trying to imagine. But I think one thing that I really enjoyed about getting through this more unknowns phases of the directions is that I think we had a more clear direction before we go to the site, is that we tried to, you know, create a new material. I think that is what, you know, in our team, we all cleared about it, and it's already imaginable that, you know, what kind of material is potentially can be, you know, what kind of biomaterials, what kind of mixture, what kind of industry that we can look into. But when we come into Kuala Sepetang, there's one major shift of I think maybe that's my personal mindset as well, is that how I see the locals are not looking into waste management, because for them, there is no waste management needed. When everything is around them and it's organic and it's useful and there's no waste. So like what Randall was sharing just now is I'm really happy that Randall able to already pick up that in a very short presentation, is that it's hardly find waste throughout the entire industry. So it's easier for us to, like, we take on waste, you know, and then we turn it into something else, or we take from the nothingness into something. But at the same time, is that now that we start to look into, is that what is that conditions that allow this to happen? And when we have the conditions, so I think we're really thankful with Mr. Chua as well, is that then we have a lot of experiment ground. So with sort of like temperature as a conditions, or like, you know, weather as a conditions, and then that sets a part of how we can experiment forwards. This is a little bit more technical part rather than on the social part, but I think this is also then further blends in when we have our second or third stage, when we are a little bit more clear about an environment. And I think that takes time, you know, we cannot actually pick it up in like 2 trips or three trips. So we have along the way, I think with Colllab, what is good is that there's a team that always can pass on, that they can then revisit the site and, you know, carry on the different type experiments. Yeah, I think for now, I think we are really glad is that we're able to open up the different sort of doors to look into the different potentials.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, good luck with that. Thanks.
All right. I think with that, Gary's question, I would like to, because we are running out of time, I know a lot more have more things to say, and we will always keep our conversation open to anyone. You can always drop us an email at any time onto Real Life Archival, or even our Instagram page. We'll be sharing some updates about our upcoming discourse. So Discourse 3 will be intuitive making, target to happen on the first week of May. If you're still interested with the project, then we hope to see you on our next online discourse that will be announced soon. Because not all are signed up with the registration form, so we hope that you'll fill in the link on the chat to drop us your email address, so that we can then send you an notice on when we have set the date for the May sharing. Then you'll receive updates from us, and we'll open our conversation again to look at how we can move forward together. So this would be our Collab's Instagram page and Reimagine Charcoal's Instagram account. If you have more to share, but we have limited time today, you can always drop us a note or a question or a message or any inspiration over the chat in the Instagram account or email. Yeah, with that, maybe I'll let Doris to conclude today's session.
Yeah, maybe Keita as well. Can Keita come to?
Yeah, and Kate. Last words.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, Keita, maybe we end the last two to the most
Mm.
important is that what do you see in this project? I think Gary asked a very good question
Mm.
just, but what do you think about reimagining charcoal would be?
I think because I think charcoal is actually related to so many aspects of the village, right? And I think it's not just only about charcoal as in charcoal, but it's about the way it relates to the mangrove forest, and the mangrove forest relates to the fisheries. And in the end, like we are kind of started to look in context kind of entirely in a way. And of course, it's limitless, but I think, like in my mind, like, okay, so what we are gonna kind of started to have more focus on from what we found out. I think that's, as you said, when we begin this project, we thought we are just experimenting with material, right? But then now we started to discover so many more opportunities, but not only opportunities, but maybe the issues and so many things that we like to address and think about it. And so in a way, I almost feel like we need one more session about context, to be honest, but it's
Yeah, I
yeah.
think we need more time to actually delve into
Mm.
what the context can offer. But I would think that maybe one is another one is not enough as well. So so on our next session on our early of May, that we are gonna share, some of the part of process that the different teams are actually working into. So there's some very tangible material explorations, but at the same time also what do we project it to be that we can actually engage with the community a little bit more or participate with more of the different types of multidisciplinary or public to be part of the making process. So I think look forward for our next sharing or next discourse. But at the same time, we also hope that if you are interested with this kind of context or any of the material exploration and to be part of our discourse, please send us an email and we can invite you in to properly. We have a roundtable together. And I think that's all from me. Thank you, Casey.
All right. With that, I think we would put today's session to an end. Thank you everyone that joined us. We have guests all the way from UK, Japan, Taiwan, Singapore, and Malaysia. That makes us hitting up to 60 participants at one time. So I think today's roundtable discussion or discourse become very successful, and we hope to see everyone again in May to have a better conversation of this project that would lead us then to the outcome later. This would be a 2 years long project. We are just starting with our first few months. So stay with us, and good night, everyone, and good afternoon for those that is on the UK time zone. All right. Thank you. Bye. We'll end the call now.